We've got some
Hey,
fresh
I'm
new young
Luis.
talent doing
And
some
I'm
things
Luis.
that I
And
know
you're
you
listening
haven't
to the
heard
Content
before.
is Profit podcast.
We spent the last 4 years learning the strategies and techniques from some of the top marketers in the world on how to create content that turns into profit.
If you'd like to learn more about how to turn your content into profit, go to contentisprofit.com.
That's right,
Yes.
guys. And today we have someone special on the show, and we are going to talk about should you stop publishing when people hit? No, that's not right.
Come on, man.
We just read. Wow, we just read the wrong notes.
I know. We're actually going to be talking about how human connection is a field that your business needs.
That's right.
I mean, we actually had a conversation maybe 15 minutes ago about this hate. So, go back and listen to that episode because it is really fire and it's still relevant today. But
100%.
But today we had awesome topic too. It's how the human connection, man. People miss this one thing big time in their businesses, I feel like. And today we have the experts of the experts. So before we get started, please go ahead and subscribe. Smash that subscribe button on the podcast. Content is profit. If you are live with us, smash that like, share it with the people that you feel like this is going to be useful with. Follow us on social media. Go ahead.
Yeah, feel free to comment. We are recording this live for those that are watching it right now. If you have any questions, we will answer all of them. We'll stay a little bit over after we are done, and we'll answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, so if you are listening to the podcast right now, make sure you tune in Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, afternoon after 5 p.m. We are going live crazy on this and answer all your questions. So feel free to tune in at BIZBROS. All right. So this guy, Pablo Gonzalez. Pablo Gonzalez, the great Pablo that we're bringing to you guys today, is obsessed with human connection, and he's used his expertise to manage a 120-person, $50 million construction business at just 25 years old. He was able to build various young professional groups and charities as well. This is amazing.
It is amazing. He was actually named Latino Leader of the Future by Latino Leaders magazine and a top 20 under 40 for Brickell magazine. Those that don't know, Brickell is in Miami. He's now a professional speaker and the founder and chief executive connector at Connect with Pablo.
I love it. A content marketing community creation agency. That's exactly how he describes that business, providing that community creation. It is the future of business development.
That's right.
More than anything, he's dying to be your friend. And welcome, everybody, Pablo Gonzalez.
Let's go, Pablo. Yeah.
Is this happening? Is this really happening, guys?
Oh my gosh, man.
It is.
I think that was the longest intro ever, but you are super deserving of this thing and more. We're so excited to have you in here.
Thank you so much for coming up with that intro, Luis. I really appreciate that. I don't know where you got all that info about me, but it was really, really nice.
I mean, there's one thing about, we talk about content conversations and Facebook stalking, and I think that came out of that.
He might have done his research, but you know what? I am happy that you're here and that you got to experience the whole shebang of the live episodes. Making mistakes, messing up. That's the fun part of it.
For those listening, we're just actually talking behind cameras on how we do this live and how we messed up last week, and we had a massive mess up, but guess what? Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It makes it way more fun. So again, Pablo, welcome. We are so excited to have you here. And I think actually the viewers are excited to see you here.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I'd be surprised about the mess up if I didn't listen to every single thing that you guys put out and wasn't your number one fan. I totally saw it coming. I just want to be part of the intro. I want to be this is Luis, and this is Luis, and this is Pablo. I think we could have worked that in, guys. That's all I'm saying.
I think we should definitely.
I love it.
We should do one at the end. At the end, we should do one just saying goodbye. Hey guys, this is Luis and Pablo. Thank you for tuning in.
I'm in.
All right, we'll do that at the end.
All right, Pablo. So let's get this thing started because even though we've met you for quite a while, I'm very interested to know part of your story. You said, obviously, you have some background in Miami. I love and hate Miami at the same time. Very strong feelings there.
I've heard that before.
But I want to know, how everything with community building and how everything with this content strategies that you are doing, what's the root of it? How did everything start? How did this passion started?
Episode 1. Yeah, man. So I grew up in Miami, right? I totally understand the love and hate Miami relationship. I think that Miami is a very unique thing, and you can love it or hate it. It's kind of like the halfway house between a third world country and the United States of America, and that has good things and bad things that you can like or not like, right? But for whatever reason, I consider myself a quintessential Miamian, right? Like I was born in Venezuela like you guys, but I grew up here in the States. My dad's Cuban, grew up in Miami. And, there's really nowhere else that I identify with more. So I just want to say I love that place. And I totally understand anybody that hates it.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. So tell me, like you grew up in Miami, right? And then what? Like as you're growing up, like how do you find like this passion?
Yeah, man. Listen, dude, I'm the youngest of 3 and I'm the most American person in my family. So like my whole outlook on life is being an outsider insider, right? When I first moved here from Venezuela, like there was no other Venezuelans in Miami, right? I was the only Venezuelan in Miami. Now there's a bajillion, right? But I enrolled in preschool at a time when I was the only kid that didn't speak English walking into my preschool. And my first formative memory is walking into that classroom and just not knowing how I'm going to fit in. At this point, my brother and sister already spoke English. I was like the one guy in my family that didn't.
Yeah.
And that kind of marked me forever. And then a year later, we moved to Spain where I enrolled in a British school where I thought I knew English and Spanish at this point, but I didn't understand the British or the Spanish. So again, I had that same formative memory, and that's just kind of been my obsession forever is how do I fit in and how do I belong? And as a little kid, I was the little kid that made friends with everybody and every adult. And then as I grew older, whenever there'd be a new person that come to school, I'd be the first guy to make friends with everybody. And it's been a lifelong obsession that now late in my career in my late 30s I've been able to figure out how to actually monetize.
Dude, I feel like that's amazing, right? Like I think most of us, right? Like let's say we migrated, obviously we're a little bit older, but there's a lot of families, a lot of people out there that might have, like some of our listeners might have kids, right, that they might be moving around, and that connection factor, when you go to a new place can be somewhat of a challenge. So to me, like, is incredible that you took that and completely turn it upside down, where it's like, okay, what makes this a thing, and how can I like provide some value now in my adult life, right? Like to not just to people with massive companies too. So that's amazing. Like what was like that one thing that like made you like take that next step and be like, okay, I can actually make this thing something very valuable for my life and for other people's lives?
Dude, I was just lucky, man. Honestly, I guess you could start. It's kind of a long story of how I got to that step, but it really started. I graduated my college career, got a job as a executive in training in construction for a Fortune 500 company. That's that beginning piece of my bio. I was running a big operation early in my career. Yeah. Never really liked it. 2000, I moved out to California. I became a green building expert. 2009, I moved back to Miami. I started my first entrepreneur venture, right? Green building consulting company. And luckily, my best friend, Eric Gilbert, because I know that Rich and Whit are watching this thing on Facebook Live right now, and Gilbert's going to be mad if I don't mention it. Sends me an email saying Habitat for Humanity is starting a young professionals group. And quite frankly, out of total self-interest, I'm like, I'm in this construction game. I should join this group and see if I can use it for business development. And it didn't really work out like that, but it did take me down this whole parallel path in getting involved with Habitat. We started this young professionals group that's still around, right? Yeah. Like there's still, now it's many years past and I'm a founder of this thing and it still exists. But it then got me on the board of Habitat for Humanity. It got me into this like Leadership Miami program, like you guys did Leadership Jacks, right? That's why I'm such a big fan of these programs. Got me on the board of multiple charities. And I started replicating the formula of what worked well for us in that group across other philanthropic organizations. And at a certain point, my career took another turn where my green building consulting company got acquired. And by acquired, I mean my biggest customer bought me out, right? And just like took on all my contracts, brought me in-house. I became director of sustainability in this construction company. And then a couple years into that, I realized these guys were just trying to make me patch a hole and forget about me. And they I didn't really have a career track inside of it. And I started trying to figure out how I could become more valuable.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know who the most valuable person is in a company is the person that brings in the business, right? So I was trying to figure out how I can be a business developer. And at a certain moment, I've been named top 20 under 40 for this magazine and the Latino leaders thing. I started developing this big network from being in this philanthropic organizations and networking my way through and doing all this stuff. And at a certain moment, I just figured out how to monetize that audience. And it came when I got invited to be on a panel for smart cities. My CEO didn't want to go, so they sent me in instead. I stand on this stage, and I'm on this like panel with the head of Latin America for I think it was Cisco Systems, and the head of the Smart Cities Initiative for like the World Bank or the International Economic Fund. Two people I don't belong on the stage with, right?
Yeah.
So I get up there and I just do my thing and I talk about smart cities and green building and blah, blah, blah. When I get off the stage, there's a line of 6 people deep waiting to talk to me. And that's the first time that's ever happened to me. And at that moment, I'm like, okay, a stage is valuable, right? Like, I mean, everybody thought I was more important than I thought I was, right? Like, like two or three people were like vendors trying to sell me something, thinking I had any kind of pull in my company. Two other guys were just like, yo, man, how do I find a guy like you, like trying to hire me? And one other guy came up to me seeking mentorship. Will Beckham, still a good friend of mine to this day.
Awesome.
And I just had this like aha moment of like, dude, this stage thing is like a celebrity kind of feeling, and what's going on here, right? And like, the credibility that you get by being on a stage. So I'm like, how can I make a stage for somebody else? And at that moment, I'm like, there's this like controversial project going on in Miami. There's this high rise going on in Coral Gables that people in Coral Gables don't really want. But what they don't realize is that this high rise on top of the public transportation infrastructure is going to incentivize more public transportation. It's called transit oriented development. So I reached out to that developer and I was like, listen, man, I care about this stuff. I have an audience of young professionals that should know about this. And I created this event where my pitch to him was, I'm going to put you on stage with a politician on the board of one of my charities, land use attorney that I've done a bunch of like nonprofit work with. And we're going to talk about the need for transit oriented development. And your project is going to be like the background of this thing. And we're going to talk about it to the young professionals of Miami. The guy was obviously super pumped that I did it, showed up, had this little event, put him on stage, created these relationships. The following week, he's asking us if we're bidding on this $60 million project or not, right? And that completely changed my paradigm as a business builder and a business developer in my company. And then at that point, I didn't realize it yet, but I had stumbled into this concept that I now espouse of community creation for business development. And at that point, I knew that I had been long enough in the construction industry that I never really liked. And I just started in my networking and everything I was doing. I just started telling everybody, listen, man, I think there's a different way to do it. I think I want to do this. Like every idea I had, I just started kind of like pitching it to everybody until at a certain point I got the opportunity to do it somewhere else. And, that's how it all started, right? Like that's how the whole human connection thing came. And then, we're definitely going to end up getting into content and reverse engineering how you put this stuff at scale. But that's where it all started.
That's amazing. I think it's fascinating how you had that like very first experience on a stage, and obviously we're gonna touch on this on around content, obviously, because content is at some degree can be a bigger stage too. But the fact that when you came down and you had that realization was, let me help others with this. How can I put somebody else on a stage? And I'm very curious to know, like, why was that the thought process? Because most people will have an experience like that and then they'll be like, how can I be on stage? How can my message be heard at this level? But you went specifically to like, how can I get somebody else here? So I'm very curious to go through that thought process, because first off, amazing. And second off, like, you don't see that often, right? So like, what was going through your mind? Like, what was that thought process?
I've told that story 1,000 times and nobody's asked me that question, man. So really great question.
Thank you. We did our homework. Okay. Let's go.
Honestly, Luis, I've always externalized everything, man. So I think that whole experience of being the outsider always that's an insider makes me think from outside of myself, and even to a fault, right? Like even to a fault, to the point where it's like I care more about satisfying others' needs before mine. So at that moment, really what went through my head was, wow, all these people think I'm more important than I am. That's super valuable to me. How can I use this to my benefit? You know, and to use it to my benefit wasn't how can I get on more stages. It was how can I give somebody else this experience, and then they're gonna love me for it.
I love it.
Being the provider that's how I see it, you know. And I mean, honestly, like when you're talking about community, it's that, right? You're not talking about like someone in the middle that like rules over everybody else, but like everybody's helping each other out. And I think that's an important aspect, again, of community. So I'm a little bit curious. You said that as soon as you step down from that stage and you have people coming on to you got the realization, you know. But I think personally, a lot of these realizations come like over time, that you look back and you're like, wow, like look at that time when I had this is what I'm learning from that moment. So I'm just curious a little bit to know, did you actually got that, you know, that thought on that moment, or did it came after you started joining, you know, other communities and started your journey as like a community builder?
No, that thought literally hit me like a lightning strike in that moment. But the community stuff, right? The philanthropic stuff, I had been getting more and more. There was a moment where the biggest event that I had put together for Habitat was this like 200-person event. That was like a wine tasting competition thing. It was super cool. And at that point, a couple of years into this whole thing, you start being involved in young professional nonprofit groups, whatever, right? You're going to networking events all the time because that's all you're ever doing.
Yeah.
And then if you take leadership positions, you're like getting up and introducing people and be like, oh, welcome to this volunteer build. Yep. Welcome to this event. Welcome to blah, 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 blah. So you start getting some, and then you start getting put on like panels, right? But this was my first like big panel where I shared the stage with other people. But what I had noticed was, because of all this community stuff, I was becoming a really good public speaker. I was becoming a really good networker. I was getting exposed to people that I had never been exposed to before. So all that stuff was accumulating. But that realization of, when somebody walks in a room and the first time I'm the person on stage, I'm actually a celebrity in their eyes, that had never really come on me like that. That just came out of nowhere.
Yeah. I love it. I feel like a lot of people like listening have that moment sometimes in their like content journey, right? When I remember, like, as soon as we started publishing, like everybody around us was like, hey, you guys gotta publish, you guys gotta publish, you guys gotta be present, you guys gotta be consistent. And at first hand, you could see like there was like obviously like very little audience and very little interaction. But the second like we started getting you know, that recognition of like people commenting, people like, oh my God, like what you just said makes so much sense. You just helped me. You just solved my problem, which you did on that stage, right? That was like a flow of something very positive coming into like ourselves. Like, okay, like this is so much fuel that I can now use to like give more, like just have such a bigger impact, and then build up on that, right? It starts little, but then you can build up on that.
Yeah, so I think I want to add a little bit something to that, right? You're saying when all these people were telling you to publish, I remembered my thought was like, and this is a reflection that came obviously after starting publishing. Yeah. But it was like, wow, when you think about it at first, it comes from a little lonely place, right? Where it's like, I'm going to be published and just being by myself out there, you know, kind of like just being on that stage by yourself. And obviously that can be scary because you got fear of judgment, like what other people are going to say. Or
there's so many things.
Yeah, as soon as we started publishing, we started to notice this community growth, right? Like people commenting and then we started having this conversation and say, hey, let's have a live with you and share here. And as the community grow, is easier not only for us, right? But like I feel like it just gets better to like share the message and more enjoyable to bring the people in. So like it's a fun journey for sure. I think it's a scary one to start, and I think obviously your journey was you were in those networking groups, so I think it happened in a natural progression. because of the positions that you were in. But for someone that maybe is struggling to start with their content journey, right? Like, yes, it does feel scary at first because it feels lonely. So I think what we're going to be talking about today of community creation is going to help out a lot, because it's going to maybe give you another perspective on, hey, it's not about me or this content, right? Like, it's about other people. And that's what's going to help you grow.
Dude, all of communication is about the other person, right? And content is just communication at scale, right? And I have a very similar, I have a parallel story when it descended on me, you know, that content was like, works that same way as that stage, right? Because it's easy. Yes, when you're making content, at least you don't have a crowd in front of you, so maybe it plays better to the person that's afraid of public speaking. But you also don't get that instant gratification either, right? You also don't get that feeling of self-importance. You feel kind of like a douchebag talking to your phone when you're walking around, right? Like I'm going through my 30-day life challenge just because of you guys, right? Because you guys inspired me to do it, and I'm 10 days in, and I still feel like a douche when I'm walking around and somebody walks past me and I'm talking to my phone.
Yeah, but like, it's funny, like you mentioned that, but like the other day we were making like this reflection on, yes, you are talking to a camera, but on the other side, you might have 10, 15, 20 people. And then imagine like you're in a room in front of 20 people watching you live.
It's scary, yeah.
It is challenging, right? And then like, oh my God, I only got 100 views. Only imagine yourself in a room talking to 100 people. I mean, it is an hourglass effect too. Like your message is multiplied. Then they're gonna take that message and expand it. So
yeah, I mean, even if only like if only one person out of those 100, you know, actually receives the message and they love it and they are willing to share with other people, like, is still multiplying, right? That multiplier effect.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's very parallel to the live stage, right? Because I remember my buddy Matt Anderson, who's like my big mentor in all this stuff that I did in the community creation stuff. He would always talk about how every time you're on that stage, you're just like, yeah, man, whoever wants to know more, right? Because we'd be talking to schools a lot.
Yeah.
And we'd be trying to tell kids to like reach out and like, dude, we want to show you the way. We'll connect you with internships, whatever. And you'd always give out your email and blah, blah, blah. And you might be talking to 50 kids, 100 kids, 300 kids. And one responds, 2, 3 respond. The same thing happens with content. You might be, you know, and I get this a lot from my friends, right? Like I definitely get a hard time from friends of mine that are not building online businesses, that don't understand what I'm doing with the content thing. They just think it's like, dude, why are you doing what my 16-year-old niece is doing, right? Like it's different. But
the question is, why are they not doing what their 16-year-old is doing? That's how I feel.
Correct. They haven't put.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of stuff my 16-year-old niece does that I don't want to do. So you know, but that being said, right? Like more people. The point I'm trying to make is that more people take notice than interact, and even fewer of them actually follow up. Right. So you might feel like you're wasting your time and all you're doing is looking douchey, talking in front of a camera and being on the internet. But there's people noticing, right? Like I have groups of buddies from Miami that I know like to take a dump on the whole social media thing. And out of that like chat room of WhatsApp friends that I have like 30 in, there's about 5 of them that hit me up consistently like, yo, man, what you said on Instagram was awesome. Or blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You know, like there is, and none of them have ever commented because they don't want everybody else to see it. But about 5 of those guys consistently follow up with me with my messaging. They're like, dude, help me out with this, help me out with that, because you're putting value out there at the end of the day if you're doing it right. And it's whoever, it doesn't matter who it doesn't land on. What matters is who it lands on.
Exactly. And you know, we talk a lot in the past episodes, we've mentioned like the silent watchers, right? Those people that are there watching, and you just mentioned a very good example of that. But yeah, I mean,
well, I think I'm gonna throw one out here. Pablo, I think you were a silent watcher of my brother.
A silent watcher.
Until you commented and invited him to the content dinner, right?
Yeah. But listen,
being a silent watcher is not bad at all.
Full disclosure, I don't tune into a lot of lives, right? Yeah. Like I knew your brother. I had met him that fateful morning where I showed up soaking wet, and after that I saw him like going live, blah 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 blah. But I knew he was kind of in a similar space. Literally, that was just another lightning strike. Like like he was just online in a moment where I'm like, dude, this guy just canceled on me. And I'm like, oh, Luis is perfect for this.
Yeah, and that also talks about like the consistency, right? Like being present, because again, if he wouldn't have taken the challenge seriously and he would have not been doing the lives, probably you wouldn't have found out about what we were doing at that moment.
Yeah, and for those listening, guys, like go check out the other episodes where we actually tell this story. But like one of the main things here is consistency, right? Like, and you can hear from like Pablo's story too, like how he started, and then how he started like developing the skills that is not only the consistency on publishing the content, it's also the consistency on improving your skills to continue to do this, right? No matter the circumstances. Because even though like there's some people there that might ask you like, why are you doing this? Is there a bigger purpose? Yes, we were actually talking the last like couple of days actually about, you know, what's the thing that drives people to purchase, right? What's that sell? And one of the big elements is like the building the rapport. Like make sure that there's a connection. Like people buy from people, right? And this is one of the things that, and Pablo, you can like chime in anytime you want. The businesses I feel like they miss, because once you put in that like facade of, hey, I'm an institution, I'm a business, a lot of people tend to lose that personal connection, and now they treat people differently. They communicate with people different. And I think this is where you bring so much value to this, because you're personalizing that experience for those companies that you work with. So I'm curious to see like when, like, obviously you told us like your very big moment, your like epiphany, like this is what happens, and then you start evolving and having these interactions to the point where now you work with like a $200 million company, right? You build a community for them, 1,000+ people like in a group, continuously engaging, providing value. So what's like your take on that, and how can people take advantage of your advice and make sure that, you know, they take it to the next level?
It's funny that you mentioned that, Luis, because I have this Venn diagram back here that I drew up a little earlier because I was just thinking about how I was going to explain it, and conveniently it's right behind me. But so number one is I realized at a certain moment that content was networking on steroids, right? Like for me, what I showed up at consistently all the time was networking. I was in every room in Miami all the time, and that took a lot of time to build up. And as I went through my journey of going into entrepreneurship again, building up a community for this e-commerce company, then going off on my own and kind of iterating through my whole, how do I prove that the connection thing works? I realized that if you're able to take all the things, everything that works in connection, right? In building a relationship. To me, quickest way to build relationships is add value to somebody's life. They're forever gonna want to, you know, be like, all right, man, this guy cares about me, right? And that's something that I realized in the nonprofit world, and building those connections aside. Also, shared vulnerability works a lot, right? So if you can design something where you are creating, and this is what the Venn diagram is, right? But like,
so we're gonna actually show it to the people like live so they can see it in the background. So we can see it now. So we have value in one corner, and then we have relationships and content right at the bottom, and then right in the middle in red it says community. Correct. So, you know, for a long time I was driving community by joining up. So the way that we started these young profit groups, these young professional groups, was the way that we would host our meetings, right? To like plan whatever happy hour we were planning or volunteer event we were planning. We would say our monthly meetings, we're going to have it in the boardroom of somebody's company that is on the board of the charity, right? And like big business leaders are on the boards of charities. So the beginning of the meeting would be the big business leader talking about their career, sharing their tips and tricks, having a private Q&A with them. Anybody that wants can then follow up, create the connection, and then you have your meeting, right? So like we would offer people value and a relationship, right? So like you were going to come and volunteer to create something, but you're going to get advice from somebody who's been there and the potential to form a relationship from someone that's been there. And that worked great in person. When I realized that content works the same way as networking created, right? And if I were to redo this again, I would tape all these things, chop them up and split them out, like what we do for JWB, right? Yeah.
So what I realized is that if you are driving that and creating content around it, that intersection right there is what creates that community at scale, right? Because you can create community by value and driving relationships. And then if you can distribute that out at scale, now mentorship is the mentorship that I get from Gary Vee, right? Like I've met Gary a couple of times, but he absolutely mentors me in the fact that I listen to all his stuff. I read his books. I listen to his podcast, and I have taken mentorship from his lessons because he is taking interactions with people like me who are asking him how to apply the way that he's done things for his life in their own life. And I've taken a ton of value out of it. Right. And that has created his community. So what I drive companies to do is to figure out that intersection, right? Perfect. Find out what your clientele or the people that you are trying to serve and get business from. Figure out what kind of value you can offer them. Figure out how you can turn that into a relationship building process, which normally is a Q&A process, right? So if you are creating like what we're doing with JWB, right? Like if you are creating an interview process around a community leader or a business leader that can give you some advice and then give somebody in your clientele or your future clientele or someone that you want to get close to access to interact. Yeah. And then you take that interaction and you redistribute it. Now you are putting people up on that proverbial stage that we talked about, and then you are sharing that knowledge at scale. So, you create, to me, it's all about being the stage, right? You create that stage where all that interaction point happens, which for me at first was just a simple panel in a meeting room. But now, because we got Zoom, we got YouTube, we got podcasts, we got whatever, you can create that. You got Facebook, right? Like what we're doing on a live, you can create that interaction and that value exchange at scale. And it just becomes this ball that keeps feeding that then turns into community.
I love it. We talk often about, those, and thanks for sharing that with us. And, if you are listening to the podcast, just make sure to go to our Facebook page and YouTube because this video is going to be there and you can actually see the graph behind Pablo. So you can actually visualize this pretty well. But we talk often about points of contact, right? We say that content or your marketing, right, is the start of a sale. Like if you're a business and you're producing content, it is a way to bring people into your business and do a sale and then ultimately make profit for that business. So to make a sale, you need points of contact. A lot of people kind of mistake this one or like with, hey, I'm going to call you. I'm going to ask you to come in. I'm going to call you. I'm going to ask you to come in. I'm going to text you and I'm going to ask you to come in. Instead, why don't we see these points of contact like you are saying, right? Like we create these events and then with content, you can redistribute these to your network, to your community, to your stuff. And that's still a point of contact, but it's a higher value point of contact because you're providing information, you're building their rapport, you're building their relationship to the point where they're ready to purchase, they're ready to trust you, they're ready to make, that transaction. All this content kind of like help them make that decision a little bit easier.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, doing the touch points, and Pablo, you're going to laugh about this, but if I'm gonna reference a book right here, and if you guys haven't read The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes, he actually talks about the act of selling breaks rapport, and education builds up rapport, right? And at the end of the day, if you wanna sell to someone, you need to have that rapport, that trust between each other. And building these communities, right? Like offering value, they help you get that sale, right? Because it's gonna get you more of those quality touch points that you were talking about. Yeah. And now when you include the content, like Pablo was saying, you're doing it at scale, and you're not building only a relationship with one person, right? But you have the potential of doing it with so many other people out there. So I think it's fantastic. I think the diagram behind you, definitely, if you're listening again in Spotify, any other platform, go to Facebook and watch it. It's a piece of art.
It's a piece of art. All right. So
can we tell the story? Real quick of why that's funny, why we laughed about it? I hear the music happening. I know you're trying to cut me off, man.
No, you're good. You're good. I was actually going
to... Stories builds relationships too.
I have a question for you right after you tell this story because we can't, we have to tell it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. So long story short is I had this idea in my head, a content dinner that I had forever, right? And it was just like getting a couple of intelligent people together, having a good conversation and just have it all recorded and then giving everybody little pieces of micro content that they can promote themselves with. Somebody canceled on me last minute. I saw Luis, number one, live on Facebook the night before. and so I reached out to him. I'm like, hey, man, you want to come to this? He's like, yeah. He comes over. when he gets there, I'm trying to figure out how to solve the problem that I have of onboarding this big client that we have that we're now working with, of how do I downstream redistribute my content, which you guys do so well. And he's sitting there telling this story of how you guys got to, I'm talking to the listener, right? I'm not even talking to you guys, right?
I love it.
So Luis is sitting there telling the story of, we went to this conference, and then my brother read this book, and my brother's like, dude, we got to do this. And then we started doing this, and then we go to this other conference, and my brother reads this book, and he's like, you got to do this. I'm like, like he told the story, the whole progression of the BIZBROS business on like, my brother said this, so I did it. Then my brother said this, so I did it. And I was like, bro, I got to meet this brother. It's amazing. And now to this day, you still every single time, so it's FONZI. Every single time, you're like, dude, I got a book for that. So every time you say you got a book for it, like, it's the best, man. It makes me so happy.
No, I love it because it was funny. Like I went live for like 5 minutes, like right before this episode, still doing it, right? And one of the things, like we're preparing like this new secret-ish project that we're gonna be announcing very, very soon. And then during the conversation of planning this thing, he goes like, we should have a book club, the FONZI book club. So please.
Honestly, it's a little selfish out here, but I was like, we should have a FONZI book club. So it actually makes me finish more books. I'm like, I'm going to be, have a commitment with people out there that like, hey, we're going to review this book. So it's going to make me have to read it, all the way through. So
I love it.
FONZI, if you start on LinkedIn, you just start kind of giving out your book recommendations on a daily basis, right? Like that's great content. Yeah. That is real quick copy. That's just like, hey, play bigger. This was the category design playbook. It was awesome. I learned XYZ. Boom, done. Like you'll get a following from that, man. You're the maven.
That's value right there.
That's value there.
And we get people commenting. We build relationships. And since it's content, we are doing it at scale. Hey,
if you're listening or
Pablo.
watching, you are actually seeing this strategy like unfold in your eyes. Like you cannot you can
in your ears. I think.
Or you're listening in your ears. You're watching through your eyes. Yes, that is correct. Oh my goodness!
But it's happening in your brain.
It's happening in your brain.
Right.
So and people think this is harder than it is. Like you could actually do this very simple. A lot of the people that listen to us that communicate with us always have a hard time trying to figure out the technical side of it. How do I do it? Like what is the equipment? We have been having content conversations with a ton of people through Instagram Lives. It allows you to be present for their audience, to your audience. And if you have these kind of conversations, it doesn't have to be a big fancy podcast. It can start right there, and then you can evolve from that. I mean, you have been doing this for a couple of years now. Like we have been doing this for a couple of years now. So if you are starting up, please go ahead and start, right?
Yeah. And Pablo, I have a question for you because I want the listeners to relate a little bit more to the whole situation of community building, because again, as marketers, we always listen, your best asset is your email list, right? And a lot of people consider their email list their community, right? Because you can reach out to them and talk to them every single time, but at the same time it's a little difficult for them to email you and you actually like responding, because let's be honest, if you have a list of 1,000 people and they all email you back, like you might not get back to all 1,000 people. So I don't know how much of a community actually that will be considered. But I want to ask you, what has been, what of the biggest challenges that you found when trying to build these communities, for example, for JWB and some of your other clients, right? That people right now, they're sitting on their desk and they're like, okay, like I want to build a community for myself, for my business. I want to reach out more people, give them more value, build these relationships. How can I do it, right? How can I go past the first, 3-5 years of struggle and, kind of like fast track that process? Like what would be some of your recommendations?
Approach it from a service mindset. I think it's much easier to go through something difficult if you are doing it for somebody else. That's just me, right? Like I heard Aubrey Marcus say this one time. I don't know what he was talking about, but he was talking about trying something different and having a Spartan mentality, right? When Spartans go into war, their wives would tell them, return with your shield or on it, right? So that it wasn't like, don't lose the war, like get killed if you're going to lose the war and go out in glory, right? Like if you approach something with that standpoint of like, I am here to serve, I'm here to serve a purpose, I'm here to help other people, then when it fails, you're just being carried out on your shield like a hero, right? So I think that's a really important mentality shift of, yes, it feels weird to make content. It feels weird to like think that you know more than everybody else. You don't know more than everybody else. But if you can help that one person, and if you can just go through that one awkward moment just so that somebody hits you up, like, man, one of the guys that I talk about in my networking speaking points and in my relationship speaking points about the guy who I learned how to ask good questions from, he recently, I was talking to him on the phone. He's like, dude, you don't understand. I love your, like, he's one of those watchers that has never commented.
Yeah.
And he's like, you don't understand. I love your content. Like, whenever I'm going to a networking event, I don't feel like it. I turn on your like speech about how to walk into a room and like instantly connect with someone, and it pumps me up. I'm like, dude, like, you're my mentor. Like, I talk about you in this. You know?
Amazing.
So
Amazing.
it's a big thing, man. So I think approaching it from like what you can do for other people and less about what you can do for yourself helps a lot. And there was something else that I was going to say, and I'm totally forgetting.
No worry. What you think on that one, I want to add, I think that is a great point, you know, and Brandon Bouchard actually says that too, that is like, hey, a lot of the times it's difficult to find that self-motivation to do some things yourself. So when you find yourself in that position, just think about who needs me on my A game, right? So I can complete this task. And it's funny, I actually had that on a sticky note in my computer. It's kind of like, who needs me on my A game? Because I'm going to be 100% honest. I'm one of those people that get lazy super quick. I mean, you can ask my brother. I was taking a nap like 30 minutes ago.
Oh yeah, just go watch the Instagram stories.
In the ground at the office.
Fonzie wakes up looking this good, people. He wakes up looking this good.
Yeah.
I woke up and I had no beard. I was like, what happened?
In the Q&A, we're gonna answer the questions of, you know, why he looks that way.
Listen, I remember what I was saying, right? Yeah. The other mental hurdle to overcome is that people are used to seeing the content that they put out the way that PR agencies see it, or the way that it used to be, right? Like, people used to, you put out a PR press release and you're like, bro, this thing better be on point, because for the next 3 months, this is all I'm talking about. But if you can figure out a way to show up consistently, which, by the way, this is it, right? Show up on social media, go live every day, have question and answer sessions where you can recontextualize, then you can be as authentic as you possibly want. Because whatever you say today, if it happens to be wrong, as long as you really believed it, whatever you say today, even if you're wrong and someone questions on you tomorrow, you can be like, yeah, I was wrong about that, but it's really like this, and this is why I learned it. And you can continue to contextualize, man. To me, that's the value of what we're doing for big companies, right? It's the fact that right now, the CEO of the company can show up and tell everybody, yeah, man, coronavirus is happening. This is what I think is going to happen with the economy. And if he's wrong, next week, he gets another shot. And someone can show up and be like, yo, you said this. You're like, yeah, I did say that. But like, then this week, this happened. So recontextualization, right? The way that everybody's different, right? Everybody's had a different path they've walked in. So everybody internalizes messaging differently. So the more ways that you can explain the same thing to a different person who asks it slightly different, like Gary Vee, the better shot you're going to get for your message to land everywhere.
I agree 100%. Sorry. And I think this goes as well with what Seth Godin says. He's like, is the worldview, right? Like, when you talk to someone and like messages connect with each other, it's because you probably have a similar worldview than another person. If another person has a different worldview, there's going to be probably a little bit of conflict in there. And the fact of being consistent in the platforms and just sharing your message over and over again is just going to help you literally attract the people, the worldview that wants to listen to you and wants to, in a business sense, they want to do business with you and work with you. And it's going to help you serve them better as well.
Yeah, I love it. I mean,
you got that from a book, right? You got that from a book.
I did.
I love it. I mean,
all marketers tell stories. That's the one.
That is the one. Hey, I mean, to kind of follow up on what Fonzie was saying, right? Like, we've talked about, you know, being clear on your message, right? But being clear on your message doesn't happen overnight, right? Even for big companies. And they have to put it out there. They have to test it. You know, what's my audience responding? Like, how are they responding? What do they want? Like, how can I portray in a way that can be super useful to them? And that takes time and repetition. And if you're going to be putting a piece of content once every 3 months, once every 2 months, it's going to be really challenging to get there, except like if you just like give yourself permission to be out there like great influencers, because what they do, they go put the message out there, see the response in their audience, track it down, adapt, launch it again. So I feel like big companies some of them are like jumping on this, but some of them are still behind. And not just big companies, but also small businesses, right? Brick and mortars. It is a free way to get your message out there. It doesn't matter if it's one person, two people, like 10 is a free way to get your message out there. And as long as you're consistent, you can achieve, what Pablo has been talking about all afternoon. So with that, Pablo, do you have anything else that you want to leave our audience with? Like, what is like your big takeaway? Like your one thing, like your one nugget? I mean, we had like 30 nuggets in this conversation, but it's like, well,
and I think we're going to have to do round 2 eventually.
We will need to do round 2. Yes.
And well, first of all, I want to give a shout out to Rich Ricky, who's watching live, and he's my buddy. And I've been talking about doing a podcast with him for a while. And up until you guys launched your podcast, I was like, this is what we got to sound like. These 2 guys going back and forth is the shit.
Oh my God.
So,
well, yeah, Rick, we need confirmation in the comments that you're actually going to do that. So go ahead and make the commitment with Pablo right now, please.
And we appreciate the compliment too, Pablo.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Isn't. And listen, man, I got the biggest point I usually leave people with is just the idea that we're a social animal, right? Like the human being didn't get to the top of the food chain acting alone, right? Like it was like one caveman talked to another caveman. They're like, yo, we can go take down a woolly mammoth, right? And the only way that you can get good at that is through communicating with people.
Yeah.
And the only way you get good at communicating is iteration. It's what we just talked about, right? Like that story you just told about developing your message. You can do it through content every day of your life. You know how I got to my message of my company? I went to 4 conferences in 2 months and I talked to 1,000 people. So if you're an exaggerated extrovert, you can do it that way. Or you can use content to start a conversation, have it at scale, get feedback 24/7, and just get clear on your message. Figure out where you want to be. And every time that you're communicating, think about it from the other's perspective, right? You never start a conversation with anybody. You simply enter a conversation that's happening in someone else's head already. So you need to get into that frame of mind. You need to figure out how to communicate that. And if your message isn't coming across, it's not because of them. It's because of you. It's because you haven't tracked down that pace that they're walking on and get on that same pace and get into that message and get on it, man. And I think it's the most powerful skill in the world. And I think you guys are really, doing really well at it. And the content thing is key, man. So content is profit. I'm in.
Dude, I absolutely love that, what you said about joining the conversation that they already have in their head. I think that is absolutely 100% right. Just mind-blowing. That, honestly, people, I'm going to say this, but it's like, if you need to listen one part of the interview, like, this is it.
This is it.
Obviously, if you made it here, you listen to the whole interview. So
and we thank you. And we thank you. Pablo, how can people find you? How can people communicate with you? How can people connect with you?
Yeah, man. Connect with Pablo is my thing, right? My social media handles are Connect with Pablo on Instagram, on YouTube. I got networking and business relationship building tips on YouTube. Instagram is really just for me. It's kind of who I am, but I communicate on there a lot. In Facebook, I'm Pablo Gonzalez, which is kind of impossible to find because there's a bajillion Pablo Gonzalez's. My website is Connect with Pablo. My email address is youshouldconnectwithpablo.com. And my podcast, The Chief Executive Connector with Pablo Gonzalez.
All right.
I would love for people to give that a listen. Episode 7 is a story, rap, motivational speech that I'm really, really proud of how I built my business and where I got to where I'm at right now of 2019. It's called The Last Call. I'd love for anybody to listen to that and hit me up and tell me what they think.
For those who don't know, he is also a rapper. So I'm going to leave it there. There is a surprise in that podcast that you do not want to miss. So please go ahead and go listen to Pablo. Pablo, please don't leave. We're going to cue the outro here, and then we're going to answer the questions that we have live in just a second, okay? So
do I get to be part of the outro? Don't forget to make me part of the outro.
Let's do an outro together here.
Okay. How are we going to do this?
This is going to be the first time, so we're going to be like...
So this is how it's going to go down, right? So we're going to go like, hey, I'm Luis, and I'm Luis, and then...
And I'm Pablo.
Perfect. And you're listening to the Content is Profit podcast. Thank you. And then
you listened to
and you
the
listened.
Content is Profit podcast.
Do we all say Content is Profit podcast at the same time in harmony?
Let's see how it goes.
I like it. I like it.
All right, let's see how it goes, okay? Audience, thank you so much for staying tuned till this moment in all the platforms.
Don't forget to like if you're watching live, comment, and please share it so we can, reach more people and help out other people. And Pablo, with his message, can help others build their community. And if you're listening on any other
Apple
platform,
Podcast, Spotify,
just
anything.
Smash the subscribe button.
I love it. All right, Pablo, you ready, my man?
Let's do it.
Oh, sorry.
All right, let's do this. Okay.
We've got
Hey, I'm Luis.
I'm Luis.
And this is Pablo.
And you listen to the Content is Profit podcast. Oh, man. Okay, so I feel like this is probably going to be like our outro style now. Pablo, thank you so much.
I like it.
Everybody listening, thank you so much. I know this was a little bit longer than we usually do, but the information here was so much gold fire, however you want to call it. It was amazing.
Yeah, we will have to be back for round number 2 for sure.
Yes. All right, guys, have a wonderful night. Thank you so much, and see you later.